The unsheltered population in Santa Cruz is one of the highest in the nation. So we have a huge problem. The answer to homelessness is housing. We need to get people into housing first. And we say that's first because we got to get them into a safe environment and then provide whatever services they need to hopefully go on and live a thriving life. So whether it be mental health or substance abuse or trauma care or workforce development. And in California, we have 175,000 people who are unsheltered. We have 500,000 who are at risk of losing their shelter.
Right. All right, hello and welcome again to another episode of Sacktown Talks. Today, we're glad to be joined by Gail Pellerin from Santa Cruz. Gail, how's it going? Thanks for joining us.
Going very well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're brand new up here this year. Can you kind of, I know, how's it going? How's your adjustment here to Sacramento in your first 6 months?
So far, so good. I actually worked up here before, back in the late 80s, early 90s. I worked in Sacramento. I worked for the Speaker's Office of Majority Services, SOMS, when Willie Brown was Speaker, and worked my way up through that office. I actually started in the district working for Rusty Reyes in Los Banos and lived there and then moved up here to Sacramento.
So you were on both sides of the speaker fight, huh?
Well, at that time was early. Yeah. It was early before that fight started. And yes, I was working for Willie Brown at the time. Gang of Five were here. So and I ended up working as assistant director, worked my way up to assistant director in his office, covered the assembly floor, budget, committees. So it's,
okay, so you worked on the floor?
It's been a few decades, so it's all coming back to me a little bit here and there.
Oh, that's fun. So you saw how it used to be.
Yeah.
To how it is now.
Yeah, with John Burton and Mike Roos and Dick Floyd and
So what are
Tom Hannigan, all the great.
What are some of the stark changes you've noticed?
There's just, I was just talking to Gary Condit that I missed the conference committees, for budget negotiations. I really thought those were helpful and insightful where, all the stakeholders got in a room and you just worked it out and you hashed out all the details. And certainly, we have a great new crop of people. I love the diversity we have in the legislature now. We didn't have as much diversity back then. And so it's really exciting to see more people who are diverse, people, the BIPOC community, LGBTQ, women. I'm very proud to be in the Women's Caucus and happy to see that we're at 50 members and hope we'll get to parity and beyond really soon. Yeah.
Really close to 60.
Yeah.
So where did you kind of grow up?
So I grew up in Southern California.
Okay.
Born in Torrance, lived in Gardena. Family worked our way up. We moved into San Ynez Valley and went to high school there. And then I went to college at Cal Poly San Luis.
Okay.
And then majored in journalism and political science. Didn't quite get that second major. My dad did not believe women should go to college. So I worked since I was 13 years old, and because I knew I wanted to go to college. So I started out as a motel maid and then worked in bakery in Solvang, of course, and I could direct you to the best bakeries in Solvang. And then worked in restaurants and just paid my way through college because I was very intent on going to school. So worked full time, some quarters, and worked through summers just to get through and make my way through, and graduated. And I was working for the Morro-based Sun Bulletin and was doing that and going to school. And then I graduated on the weekend. And then on Monday, all I had to do was go to work. And I thought, wow, this is so easy, not having to go home and have assignments to do.
Right.
And so I was a reporter, and I very quickly learned, and then I ended up moving to Sacramento because I wanted to work for the Sacramento Bee. So I took a job with the Elk Grove Citizen, and I covered the legislature. I covered the different neighborhood association groups. And I remember sitting there in the room.
Was it like late 80s?
Yeah, late 80s and early 90s. And I was, I'd be sitting there just going, why don't they just do this? And I have a solution in my head, and I wanted to chime in and say, hey, why don't you guys do this? And so I realized I had a lot of opinions. So that's when I went to work for Rusty Reyes in his district office. So that was actually 87. Yeah. So that was in 87. I moved to Los Banos.
From Elk Grove to Los Banos.
From Elk Grove to Los Banos. Lived in Los Banos, where I connected with a lot of amazing women. We put on one of the biggest women's conferences in Los Banos, where we had women from throughout the county and the region come and participate. And I worked for Rusty. I remember at the time there were, the Ducks Unlimited and the Wool Grower
Right.
Association, and the female groups for them were the Ducky Darlings and the
Ooh.
Little Bo Peeps. And I was a proud member of each of those groups. And, so then I was living there, working there, and wanted to just expand to Sacramento, and had an opportunity to have a position in the speaker's office, and moved up to Sacramento and got a place in Tahoe Park and lived
Nice.
and worked here. And my first assignment when I started here is I started a district office help desk, because we didn't have the internet. We had phones, right?
Right.
So when people had constituent casework and problems that would come to the district, they didn't know who to call. So I started a thing, who you going to call? And started a district office help desk where people could call, and we would direct folks what agency or who to contact
Right.
for different constituent questions and problems. And then became assistant director, and yes, worked through the Gang of Five, and glad to see they're all friends now.
Kind of, you work with some, historical members there. Kind of what did you learn from them, and kind of what did you learn from them that you're kind of bringing into your membership today?
I was, I worked with, legends as far as Leslie Medina, Billy Rutland, Dotson Wilson,
Right.
Michael Glizio.
So you know the rules really well.
I know that I used to have them down, every rule I had memorized. So I'm working on that now. I'm still trying to get a Mason's rules of order. I've lost my copy over the years, but, and I am a rule follower. I love the rules. I love the structure of the legislature and how you can use different rules to your benefit depending
Right.
on what's happening. And so, I was given some really good advice early on as far as be kind to the people you pass on the way up the ladder, because you'll be kissing their behinds on the way down. And I think that's just good advice, to just treat people with respect and be civil and kind, and open to ideas, and let people speak and let people have an opinion. And, you might learn something,
Right.
it might help you in developing your opinion. And, certainly working for Willie Brown, he is brilliant. He just has an incredible memory. And just, smart. For me, he was always very approachable as well. And, but I always admired him where he could have like one of the top, people in Sacramento waiting to see him, but also waiting to see him was a woman from the district on welfare who needed assistance and help. And he would see her before he would see the other high-powered person in the office.
Right.
So he was just really a person of the people and put their interests first, and was a huge fighter for the most vulnerable in our state.
Yeah.
So I hope
Amazing
to
guy.
carry that with me in my service here as well.
Yeah, definitely. And then in the mid 90s, at 93, you moved to Santa Cruz
Got
somehow?
married, moved to the top of a mountain in Santa Cruz County. And one of my first jobs actually was I worked for this sheet metal manufacturing company in San Jose called Touche Manufacturing, and worked with them on getting MBE, a Minority Business Enterprise grant money, because that's actually a bill I'd worked on with Maxine Waters when she was here. And so I was able to get them some training money and some grant money. But my husband was working in San Jose as an attorney, and we were living in Santa Cruz County. We wanted to have a family, and I wanted to be close to where the kids were going to go to school. So I ended up taking a job in Santa Cruz as the elections manager. So I started that in 1993 and jumped into an election where, Sam Farr was running for Congress,
Right.
and, so we had these special elections going on, and learned a lot about voting systems. And one of the first couple elections we had, I was in the ballot counting room, and all these chads were flying out. I'm like, what's happening here?
Right.
And my predecessor, Richard Bedell, our county clerk at the time, said, well, those are the chads. They're like hanging chads that are flying off as the ballots are going through getting counted. And I went, oh no, we are not keeping this system. So in 1995, I converted to a mark system that people fill in an oval. And then, of course, years later, we had the
Right.
incident in Florida. So I was ahead of my time.
Exactly. Wow.
And yeah, I loved it. And so I was the elections manager working with Richard Bedell, who was our county clerk, recorder, treasurer, tax collector. He merged into many titles. And then when he decided to retire, I was appointed to the county clerk registrar of voters piece of it, and they split up the office, and I was elected to that position 4 times.
And you were there for what, 15
20,
years?
well, 27 and a half years in total
20,
between
okay.
as the chief elections official, either elections manager or county clerk. Yeah.
I always forget. Yeah, 2010, 2020, or 2023 now.
Yeah.
I guess
Time
that
flies.
is
Don't even
nearly
ask me
30
what year that all happened. I had to look at my notes. I can't remember.
Wow. And so, like, this is like the big thing now. Like, everyone's like, why does it take so long to count all the ballots and blah, 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 blah.
Stop.
What is the issue? Is it just we're just getting so many mail ballots now? It just takes time to count them?
Well, I mean, it's a very detailed process. We want it accurate. I want accuracy over fast. And when you speed things up, mistakes happen. And yes, when you do have a lot of people using that mailed ballot, I hate to call it voting by mail because people think they have to vote by mail, but we mail you a ballot and you can either vote that ballot and walk it into a return center. You could drop it in a drop box. Yes, you can drop it in the mail with postage paid. Santa Cruz was actually one of the first counties to do postage paid before it was mandated by law. But if you are returning that ballot in those last few days before the election, it's unlikely it's going to get processed in the count election night. So, and people tend to procrastinate.
Right.
So we will end up counting more, like by the time election day comes, election night when we're counting ballots, I will have more ballots left to be counted that come in on election day or those last few days than I've already counted. And so I do have a bill to help expedite that if voters choose to do that, to be able to vote that ballot at home and then walk it into a vote center and be able to be transferred in, you have your record turned into an in-person voter and you can go ahead and just turn that same exact ballot in.
What's like, we've heard a lot about like voting machines and this and that. What's the future of voting technology out there that could, I guess, help this problem?
Well, we're not going to be doing voting on the internet anytime in my lifetime. I can tell you that for sure. I think we'd have to develop a whole new internet too, with all the security that would be needed. But certainly voters and, myself included, like that paper record, having a paper ballot that voters have seen and verified. And certainly we have accessible voting as well. So the people who are visually impaired and unable to read the ballot, they can vote on an accessible unit where they can vote independently and privately. And then they get a ballot that was printed out with the contest on it, but also has like a QR code as well. But if you have a reader on your phone, you can have your phone read to you what's printed on the paper. So that's what folks have been using if they're visually impaired to verify their votes. And then any kind of recount or audit that you do in election is done off of those paper ballots.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So the machines help speed things up. It helps with the accuracy. So, we have a county in California that has chosen to basically throw out their voting system to end their contract with the Dominion Voting and then did not provide a replacement voting system. So this county is scrambling, trying to figure out how to conduct a March presidential primary without a voting system to do all the things that they need to do. So they have now purchased one for the accessible piece because that's a federal requirement to have a voting system where any voter can vote independently and privately. But I have a bill that basically says you can't throw out a voting system without having a contract ready to go for a new voting system. The voting system has to be federally qualified, state certified. And no, we cannot do hand counts for anything more than 1,000 voters because you just lose the accuracy and it takes a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of people.
Right. So, you were doing, this for 30 years. How many
27 and a half.
How many bills did you come with like, man, we got to do this on elections and voting? I
did come up when I got elected. I had several election bills, so we could talk about those. But, I thought there's a lot of ways that we can improve the voting experience for people. And I work very closely with our California Association of Clerks and Election Officials. And, of course, I just got named chair of the Elections Committee, and I could not be more excited.
They didn't have a more qualified candidate?
Honored to be in this position. Nobody, and I'm very grateful to Speaker Rivas.
32 years out there in the assembly.
Yeah. So I've got a lot of experience doing the work. And
are you one of the first kind of election, clerks to come and be in the assembly and actually hold this position? I was trying to figure that out.
I think I might be the first county clerk elected. I think there is like an assessor who was elected and maybe a recorder, but Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
nice.
So it's pretty exciting. So
That is exciting.
yeah.
It's interesting.
And, love working with our Secretary of State, Shirley Weber, Dr. Weber. And, I think we can do a lot of good things, and certainly grateful to my predecessors on the elections committee, both Assembly Member Isaac Bryan and Mark Berman, who served in that role. So I have a lot to learn from them. Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating. So, you are a new member, just coming out of the clerkship. And you I remember yesterday we were talking about COVID. And you were telling me you married all these people.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
as a county clerk,
Mhm.
not only do you handle elections, but you handle marriages. What else?
I
do
was
you
the
do?
Office of Love and
Yeah.
Politics. Doesn't get any better than that. I loved my job. I loved being county clerk. So March 2020, we started hearing about this virus, and we were starting to open. We were doing 4-day vote centers, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday before the March primary. And I think it was like Wednesday or Thursday, I called my health director and I said, hey, what's up with this virus I'm hearing about? People seem to be concerned. We're starting voting. And we were at a polling place model at that time. So I was going to have like 90 different locations in the county where I was going to have voting being conducted. And she's like, well, yeah, you should be concerned. Why don't you go out and get disinfectant and wet wipes and tissues and have those available at all your voting locations? So I just drove out to Long's or over CVS. God, that's a long time ago, huh? CVS and Safeway, all the different stores in Santa Cruz County, and I cleared the shelves. So I had shopping carts full of wet wipes and hand sanitizer, and everybody's looking at me like I'm crazy. And I just said, no, it's for the voting. We're having to put these out.
In Santa Cruz, people were looking at you like you're crazy.
Well, because I had baskets full of all this, disinfectant, and there was not a lot left on the shelves. People were starting to get concerned, but I cleared the shelves. I would go in and just buy everything, and because I had 90 locations, I had to get stuff out to. So that's what we did. I got enough for every location. Had wet wipes, had hand sanitizer, and we got through the election, and then. As the days went on, we started meeting and as department heads, and we're like, okay, this is looking a little more serious, and county government's going to shut down. I can't remember exactly when that happened, but we had to certify the election. So it wasn't more toward the end of March when really everybody ended up in our office going to work remotely. But I was worried about feeding myself and my family. So I went to the grocery store to stock up on food in case the store is closed down. But I saw that, they put up plexiglass and people were working still. So I thought, I could do that. So on the weekend, we went out and bought the last plexiglass in Santa Cruz County. And my assistant county clerk had neighbors who were very handy and came in and installed it over the weekend. And I worked with our ISD department to set up an online appointment system. So every half hour we had an appointment, and all staff went to work remotely. And myself and my coworker, Daisy, who was my accounting tech, came in and we operated the office. And Daisy was very happy to come in. She's like, please don't make me stay home with my 2 teenage sons. She would much rather be at work. So, and it worked out perfectly because I was the public facing person. I was issuing marriage licenses and doing weddings. And then she made sure my cash, my cash register balanced at the end of the night. So
you actually married the people, or you just the witness?
No, I was the officiant. Yeah. Wow. So, and the reality is that if you had a wedding planned April 2nd, it was canceled. And I believe I was the only county clerk's office open in the state of California because people from all over the state came to Santa Cruz to get married. I even had somebody who was back east visiting a girlfriend who was from Santa Clara County and could not find anything open in New York and around any neighboring states, called Santa Clara. They were closed, called me. I answered the phone and they were like, are you there? I said, yeah. And I said, they wanted to get married. I said, well, I could fit you in tomorrow. And he's like, well, we got to drive from New York. So they drove from New York to Santa Cruz to get married.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I had another couple.
So how many total people did you marry?
Oh my gosh, hundreds, I think. Yeah, I was every half hour for months, And I had one woman come in she was in her 80s. Her fiance was probably early 90s in a wheelchair. And I know she had called me earlier in the day. I remembered her voice, and she asked whether the building was open and accessible. And I said, yes. And then she showed up with no appointment. And she's like, I drove 300 miles to get here. I'm not leaving until you marry us. And I said, okay, let's get you married. Wow. And I think they were worried about dying and not having that, that legal marriage. So got them married and off on their merry way. So,
wow.
yeah.
And here you are, co-author of ACA 5,
Yes. Yeah.
So you just carried that spirit here.
Yes. No. Yeah. No. When I was running for this seat and I was being interviewed by the League of Women Voters, they asked what would be my first bill I'd want to introduce, and I, as a county clerk, and going through the time when I could not issue licenses to same-sex marriages, same-sex couples, and then being able to do it for the first time, that was like a glorious day. So much fun.
Yeah.
We had 3 weddings occurring every half hour. Anyone who wanted to get married could get married. Huge celebration, rainbow roses, cupcakes. It was just a fabulous day. And only to find, when Prop 8 came on the ballot and passed, to find that we had to stop again. And so it was something I definitely wanted to support. And Evan Lowe was actually on that phone call listening in to my interview and contacted me and says, I'm doing that bill. So when we get elected, we'll co-author it. So I'm on a co-author.
I guess for our listeners who don't know, can you kind of tell us a little bit about ACA 5 and kind of what it does?
So it basically enshrines in our Constitution that marriage is between people who love each other, and it takes out all the Prop 8 hate that's in our Constitution, and makes sure that we have enshrined in our Constitution the right to marry and marriage equality for everyone. So same-sex couples, multiracial couples, and just making sure that anyone, love is love.
Right.
And one thing, when I stayed open during COVID, I was quoted in the paper as saying love was essential, and I believed it was essential during a pandemic, and I believe it's essential as a leader in the state assembly. I mean, if we don't lead with love, if we do not approach the major crises that we have in California, whether it be homelessness or mental health or education or transportation or climate, if we don't approach those issues with love in our heart, then I think that we're not getting the best policy.
Right. That's well put. I guess a lot of people don't know that even though Prop 8 passed and was struck down by the courts, actually its language is still in the Constitution, right?
Yeah. So we actually did our last wedding on the night of that election. So, because people were worried, and as they should be, and we're worried now. I mean, it seems like we keep fighting the same battles,
right.
And just what happened, it was actually on my birthday, June 24th, when the courts ruled on Roe v. Wade and said that was no longer the law of the land, and that states started banning abortions. And that was devastating to me. And that morning, like I said, it was my birthday. My daughter, who's now 25, was home, and I was sleeping in because it was my birthday. And she got up and was just in tears and told me about the Supreme Court decision. And before saying happy birthday, she's like, we got to plan a rally. And we planned a rally that day, and my daughter spoke at that, and I did as well. And it was just really powerful.
So, you talked about how, you moved to Santa Cruz, you wanted to have a family. Tell us about your family.
Yeah. So my husband was Tom Chaffin, and he was like a lawyer over in San Jose. And we have 2 children. My daughter, my son was born first, Jacob, who's now 28, and my daughter, Emily, who's 25, and was married 25 years. And in November of 2018, my husband died by suicide.
I'm sorry to hear that.
He took his own life, which was devastating to our family. And suicide was not something I had spent a lot of time thinking about or talking about. And it turned me into, I learned a lot. Number one, I first thought it was a selfish act, and how dare he do this? And I learned a lot that it's not a selfish act. It's something that occurs when somebody is in such a horrible place of darkness and pain. They see no way out, and they lose their fear of death. So he, I believe, had an undiagnosed mental health condition. And I think a lot of people who are suicidal are struggling with mental health conditions, and there's a huge shortage in getting care and getting a counselor and getting help when you need it the most. So I'm super excited about the 988 system that's in place. I think that's a great first step as far as someone to call, but we still need someone to come. I'm an advocate for 24/7, 365 mobile mental health care, and we need facilities, we need counselors, we need programs to help people through these tough times.
A lot of talk over COVID about homelessness, mental health, things like that. Kind of what are some of the things you're seeing in Santa Cruz County with homelessness and kind of how to deal with these issues?
Yeah, well, the unsheltered population in Santa Cruz is one of the highest in the nation per capita. So we have a huge problem. And so the answer to homelessness is housing. We need to get people into housing, and housing first. And we say that's first because we got to get them into a safe environment and then provide whatever services they need to hopefully go on and live a thriving life. So whether it be mental health or substance abuse or trauma care or workforce development. And, in California, we have 175,000 people who are unsheltered. We have 500,000 who are at risk of losing their shelter.
Right.
And,
That's a lot.
and the largest growing population in that are seniors, and especially, female women who are senior citizens are no longer able to afford the rent to stay in their housing. So this is a crisis that we have got to deal with. And, I'm very hopeful in the commitment of the legislature and the governor to address it. And I do believe that we can resolve homelessness.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. They had the big Scott Wiener bill the other day in the natural resources community, a lot about housing in the coastal regions.
It was a tough vote for me. I am a huge supporter of housing, and we are building housing in the coastal zone in Santa Cruz County. But I don't think we throw out the Coastal Commission's oversight, because we've seen the damage that climate has had on the coast. And we need to have the expertise oversight as far as what can be built and where along the coast. And I'd like to see a commitment in that bill that makes it affordable housing, because there really was no requirement for affordable housing. So
what is affordable housing?
What I don't want to see are
right?
high-rise luxury condos going up on the coast. What I want to see are affordable housing places where people can live and thrive.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
We just had the state budget pass, kind of.
It was a different process than what I was used to. Absolutely.
As you said.
Yeah.
Kind of what are some of the things you saw in the budget, and kind of anything that's going to help or, bring your district along?
Well, I do like the focus on the most vulnerable in our state. It's huge that we are raising the childcare, the reimbursement rate for childcare. I think it's up 25% this budget. We are focusing on education. We are focusing on healthcare. We've got mental health funding in there as well. And I think also the commitment to our climate and the climate resiliency and dealing with a lot of the issues we have in sustaining this planet. And that's going to take a huge investment as well.
Interesting. We just are coming up to the end of the legislative, I guess the first half.
Cannot
right?
wait for summer break.
We're having a summer break. All your bills have moved over to the other side.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Kind of how's your bill package looking?
It's looking pretty good. We have one that got signed into law. That was a bill that came from CACEO, which is for fictitious business names, and that people don't have to have their home address on there. So privacy issues. And that was actually another thing during COVID when I stayed open, were when businesses started getting their COVID relief grant money. A lot of them had let their FBN expire. So I had a lot of panic phone calls from businesses saying, I need a new FBN. And I said, I'll have it to you by 2:00 today. And they were excited to be able to get that quick service. But definitely some election related bills. So in addition to the bill for the county to make sure that counties have a federally qualified state certified voting system, I have a bill, AB 292, that's on Senate third reading, that would impact the March presidential primary, because if the largest growing voting population are no party preference voters, people who don't affiliate with any of the qualified political parties. And in a presidential primary, they will get a ballot without the office of president on it. And elections officials will mail a postcard to these voters saying, hey, you get an option to choose to cross over a party ballot if that party has authorized the no party preference voters to vote in their primary. So typically it's the Democratic Party that's allowed it, Libertarian Party, and American Independent Party. We could talk a little bit about American Independent Party because there's lots of confusion about the American Independent Party and independent state of mind, two very different things. But so this bill, basically what happens is a lot of people just don't open that ballot until the last minute. And my kids included. Mm-hmm. And so you may not be in your home county, or you may be working and not able to go and get a replacement ballot, too late to get a mail ballot. So on the ballot, it's actually going to say for these no party preference voters that if you want to vote on the presidential election, you'll find your options in the voter guide or wherever, and then they will be able to request a remote accessible vote by mail ballot. So that would be something they could download in their home, vote the ballot, put it in the envelope, and mail it. So, I had people that were in New York who would call me on election day saying, I got this ballot, I just opened it up and there's no president on it. And I really wanted to vote on president. Right. So this at least gives them an option if they're in that situation.
No, that's really cool. I guess on the other side, right, you're on committees. You're hearing Senate bills right now.
Yeah,
you kind of tell, I guess, the marathon it's been, I guess, this last week, kind of hearing the other side's bills and what that's been like.
It's been interesting for sure. And, I feel bad actually for the Senate because they have a lot more of us. So they have a lot more bills that they have to go through. And I know I ran into John Laird in the elevator today, and he was saying that he was up, the Judiciary Committee went from like 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. yesterday. So a marathon hearing going through all those bills. So, and just getting your, the floor manager for your bills over in the Senate. And when you do present bills over in the Senate, you have to stand at the podium, right? Instead of sitting at a table like we do on the Assembly side. So if you have a lot of bills up and a lot of testimony, it gets a little bit, it's like, can I sit down for a few minutes?
I've never particularly noticed that, but you're right. Yeah, that's funny.
But when I have a tough bill, the way that podium is with the plexiglass, I kind of envisioned myself, as a chariot rider, and just kind of, working that bill and getting it through and getting it across and passed out.
So, as a lobbyist, you're always going to the committee, you're counting ballots, you're trying to figure stuff out. As a member, when you're walking into these committees, like how often do you not know the outcome of what's going on?
Oh, I have a great team. Actually, I just want to shout out, my chief of staff, Ashley Labar, who's been in the building 17 years, incredible, amazing. My legislative director, Charmaine Mills, Rhiannon Mulligan, my legislative aide, Jennifer Copperberg is my scheduler. Oh my gosh. So critically important having a good scheduler. And we've had fabulous interns working with us as well. And in the district, I've got Marie McCarty, who's a longtime district director, and Lizette Jones and Hannah Barness as field reps. And I've got a new field rep starting in August. So we're kind of getting fully staffed. But it's a team. We're working together a lot. And I can't possibly know everything about everything. So everyone has issue areas that they're assigned, committees they're assigned, and we have briefings a lot going over all the bills. And
have you ever had any die in committee? Any bills yet?
I haven't lost a bill. Yeah. Well, in appropriations, I had
the suspense, right?
Yeah. Well, I had one that got held in committee, and then one that was made into a 2-year bill. But that's, that's okay. You don't get everything you want all the time, So, and I'm hoping to be here for 12 years. So I got a lot of time to work on getting those bills back. And
well, that's a testament of being well prepared and good staff if you haven't got shot down in committees.
I mean, there was one that I worked pretty hard to get it out, and I stayed to the bitter end to make sure that I got the votes for it. And working with the stakeholders and sponsors of the bills has been really helpful as well. So, and I, in my day, we didn't have the iPads and the portfolios, right? I mean, we had paper we had to deal with. Right. And so it's great having that, everything on that iPad that you can look up. And I'll be in committee sometimes looking up bills, but then I'll also be looking up articles about different, issues that people bring up. And a lot of this is, I went to Cal Poly San Luis, where their theme is learn by doing. And that's what I'm doing now, learning by doing.
That's funny. So I was talking to Senator Bradford the other day, and I was like, oh, the break's coming up. And he's like, that's not a break. Going back to the districts is a lot of work. He's like, being up here is a break. So everyone has a different perspective on the upcoming legislative recess. Kind of what's your recess looking like? And, what are you most looking forward to doing back in the district?
As an advocate for mental health care and co-chair of the Select Committee on Mental Health, I am a strong proponent for self-care. So I'm going to take some time for self-care starting Thursday night, and going to go with my dog and be with some friends and just have some downtime. And then I'll get back into the district. I got a couple of events I'm doing during that time and a couple of Zooms, but it's going to be pretty limited. And then I'll get back in the district, and we've got meetings and events. And I just had a pause and policy event this last weekend. We're going to visit all the dog parks in the 28th Assembly District. I have a Labradoodle named Darwin who comes up with me to Sacramento, and I'm not a coffee drinker, so I know a lot of members do coffees at coffee shops, but I'm doing, office hours at dog parks. So people can either bring their animal or just come out and talk about issues. And we did our first one this last Saturday, and we'll be doing others as well.
Does Darwin love to throw the ball?
Darwin loves being chased. That's his favorite thing.
Is he a swimmer?
He does. He gets in the ocean, and we were out at Scotts Valley, and they had these little kiddie pools, and he got in there and laid down, and by the time he was done with that day, he was mud head to toe. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We learned a lot, and we just love your energy and what you're bringing here to the legislature, and looking forward to what you're going to bring the rest of your term.
Thank you. That went so fast. Okay, great.
Awesome.
Thanks so much.
Gail.
All right.